While low energy prices worldwide have indeed helped steady some pockets of the global economy a little, there's still miles to go before the recovery becomes more sustainable. And while the Indian economy may be at an inflection point, there are a fresh set of headwinds and tailwinds to consider before the double-digit growth becomes a reality. That's the word largely coming in from India Inc. on the sidelines of the Motilal Oswal Global Investor Summit in Mumbai. CNBC TV 18's Kevin Lee and Kritika Saxena bring us this report.
The International Monetary Fund was on the money when its World Economic Outlook report in early FY17 called India a bright spot in an otherwise bleak global economy. Low energy prices have helped make this prediction a reality, and India has grown when most other economies have struggled for traction. However, while experts applaud this growth, they caution that expecting double-digit growth is a bit of a stretch.
Global growth is not going to be great. So consequently saying, don't even ask when India will reach 9 and 10%. Because without substantial global buoyancy, you will not reach the 10%. Let's be reasonably clear. But that said, don't look down on 7.5%. This, I think, is a phenomenal bright spot.
With the US Federal Reserve hinting at tightening rates soon, this bright spot may lose a bit of its brilliance in the short term. So the next step must be to ensure that reforms and conditions be such that consumption drives growth.
The standard GST level is at the expected 18%. I think general inflation in the country will also be very moderate. And that can help in many respects. It can help in fiscal management, it will help in standards of living improving, people then willing to spend more money on buying more, etc. So overall, the inflation containment that we expect from a good monsoon and the GST, to my mind, will also be very good for the economy.
Some see that consumption story is all set to play out as the year progresses.
We have had a good monsoon, and we believe that there is likely going to be a pickup in the rural in the second half of the year. And also urban, there are some green shoots. I think a combination of the fact that if there's low food inflation, consecutive quarters of decent economic growth, some of the stimuli that might come from the 7th Pay Commission payouts.
Be that as it may, this puts some pressure on the government to not only meet its April 2017 deadline to roll out GST, but to also push ahead with various other reforms, schemes and policies aimed at making India's growth and investment climate better. More so because the benefits of low global crude oil prices will not last long. In Mumbai with Kevin Lee, Kritika Saxena.
Meanwhile, all roads will lead to Delhi tomorrow when the State Finance Minister's empowered panel on GST meets for the first time after the Parliament passed that landmark legislation. With 10 states already adopting the bill, the Union Finance Minister is expected to weigh in on the importance of other states doing the same as soon as possible. But what's equally important is that industry is going to be meeting with the State Finance Ministers tomorrow. Sapna joins us now with the details. Sapna, it's a long list of demands that India Inc. has put together to do with the GST that they plan to discuss with the state-empowered panel of finance ministers. What should we expect?
Well, this is almost going to be like an open house with the industry where various suggestions can come in on exemptions, on threshold, on GST rates. It'll be a free dialogue between the State Finance Minister's panel on GST as well as what the industry's wish list is in terms of a GST rollout. But having said that, a major focus would also be on the discussion on the draft GST model law and what the industry wants on that front, what are the changes it's looking forward to. So basically, a couple of interesting points, important aspects that we need to keep in mind. One, industry across the board is asking for adequate time for a smooth transition to GST after the GST laws have been passed. Well, the government may try and take care of that by trying to prepone the winter session of Parliament so that the state GST laws as well as the central GST law is passed well in time ahead of the April 1 timeline. Apart from that, a big demand that's coming across from industry is that there should be a single centralized registration for all service providers, especially this is very important for sectors like telecom, banking, insurance, airlines, the service sector basically. Because so far the draft GST model law says that each of these service providers will have to register in each of the states where they're providing services. Apart from this, there is also a big demand in terms of the dual control and the need for a single administrative authority. Apart from that, there could be also discussions on early clarity for phasing out or for the status on area-based exemptions. Moving on from here to other issues also, like for example, under the draft GST model law, it says that for conveyance of goods valued above 50,000 rupees, documents are required. So this goes against the spirit of free movement of goods across state. Seamless movement goes against that spirit. So industry wants that also to be changed. Apart from this, service tax is going to be very, very critical. So here most of the industry is demanding that the negative list on service tax, basically that means the service tax exemption list, should continue as is. Of course, a lot of other provisions will be discussed. For example, industry also wants a 1% TDS to be dropped, and a lot of other things to be kept out of the GST chain. So those will be areas of detail.
Thanks very much for that. Sapna India Inc. there with its long wish list for the GST. The annual commerce dialogue between India and the United States will be beginning starting tomorrow. US Secretary of State John Kerry is in India. In fact, he just arrived a short while back after a short visit to Bangladesh. John Kerry will be leading the talks with Sushma Swaraj and Arun Jaitley, and both India and the United States will be hoping to bolster their economic ties. US Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker arrived in India earlier this morning. She met with Finance Minister and various other ministers. Both India and the US are hoping to achieve the target of $500 billion in global trade. The number, though, currently stands at a little over $100 billion. Ahead of the talks, Commerce Minister Nirmala Sitharaman met top industry leaders including Cyrus Mistry, Deepak Parekh, Anand Mahindra, Sunil Bharti Mittal, Chanda Kochar, among others, to set the agenda. Nirmala Sitharaman believes that the talks between India and the US will take the relationship to the next level.
A lot of areas have been specifically looked into for greater cooperation between the US and India in commercial matters. Whether you're talking of energy, whether you're talking of manufacturing of certain particular items, whether US participation in smart cities, whether looking at medical devices and their manufacturing and technology as a result which has to come to India, or even setting up of nuclear power generating, civil nuclear power generating centers.
Well, that is the Commerce Minister there on the agenda for the second US-India commercial and strategic dialogue. Now, the world's largest mobile phone chip maker has big plans for India, and the fact that the country is one of the fastest growing smartphone markets only augurs better for Qualcomm. The technology giant's executive chairman, Paul Jacobs, believes India's plans to leapfrog to 4G data services will only make the market more exciting. Speaking to me here in the capital, Jacobs says this war to get more penetration will help the consumer and build out the ecosystem.
Push this $150 million fund for investing in companies here. And we've got about 23 million of that invested now, 5 companies just since September. This market where 4G is just getting started, and so you see this new opportunity. And so we're excited about that because we're really trying to lead in the technology side. So there's all sorts of new technologies that will be coming down the pipe. We're starting out with just getting people more mobile broadband, then drive the cost down of the devices so that you get more proliferation, and then build on some of these other services that in some cases are in the rest of the world, but in other cases I have to say India will be in a leadership position on certain new technologies that are coming in the wireless world.
You've always believed that India's been the leader when it comes to actually dropping prices, and we've been able to actually do that when it comes to voice, and you believe that India will perhaps take the lead even when it comes to data. Do you believe that this leapfrog that everyone's talking about from 2G to 4G is a realistic expectation?
Well, I think 3G is certainly rolled out, but the gap in time between the rollout of 3G and the rollout of 4G probably been the shortest in India as it's been in anywhere else in the world. So yeah, I think that both systems will they'll coexist, and there'll still be some 2G, but hopefully 2G starts to go away and people get really onto more mobile broadband, because that is the thing. You know, when you get more applications, you get more usage, you get more coverage to more people, that's when you actually see the ecosystem really take off, and particularly when we see local companies we want to see them really grow up in this market and then be able to go global as well.
How much cheaper do you believe we can get? You know, we've got Indian companies now talking about selling phones for 250 rupees.
Sometimes people are making very dramatic statements, but I do believe that the mainstream phones will come down to a price point where your average person can have access to them.
So in terms of the regulatory environment in India, and the telecom sector has always been mired in controversy here, how do you see the regulatory structure at this point in time? We've got another big auction lined up, in fact the biggest auction that we've done. What do you make of that, and what's your thought on the way things have panned out as far as regulation is concerned?
Yeah, well, we're really excited about the fact that the spectrum auction is coming up and that there's so much spectrum that's available. We're a little cautious because obviously the reserve prices are very high in certain instances, and we're very hopeful that that spectrum will be able to be brought to market and be used. And we also look at it in spectrum prices also translate into cost of service too. So we want to make sure that we can work with the operators. They can best use that spectrum as efficiently as possible, generate bits at the lowest possible cost so they can get those services out to the people who need them. But we're excited about the fact that the government was very cooperative, worked closely to try and harmonize more spectrum, so get more spectrum freed up, get it put into chunks that the operators could use, dramatically increase the value, I think, for the government as well. So that money that will now go into the government's bank accounts and they'll be able to fund all sorts of other programs as well. So that's a nice,
You
nice
talked about how
too.
the reserve price is high, specifically as far as the 700 megahertz band is concerned. The government acknowledges that the price is perhaps on the higher side, but they do believe that there'll be enough takers. What do you make of it?
Well, it's very hard for me to say. I mean, obviously it's a whole dynamic between the operators to see which operators are willing to bid and what prices they're willing to bid for and so forth. You may know we were involved in an auction here at one point, and the dynamics of it are very, very difficult to see ahead of time. It really evolves as you're in it and you see where people are bidding and how that all plays out. So it's very hard for us to say.
That was Qualcomm's executive chairman laying out the big plans the company has for the India market. And staying with the telecom space, the country's largest telco, Bharti Airtel, is getting set to take on the new kid on the block, Reliance Jio. Airtel today, in fact, cut its data prices by as much as 80% for all 3G and 4G prepaid connections. This follows close on the heels of an equally big cut on its 1 GB plans. The only catch, though, is that one has to invest at least 1,500 rupees to recharge for the full year. And a standard disclaimer here, Reliance Jio is promoted by Reliance Industries, the same company which also holds majority stake in CNBC TV 18, the channel that you're currently watching. And on to an exclusive now, and this time from the world of cinema. Bollywood's Mr. Perfectionist Aamir Khan today was in an interaction with Rajiv Masand, and he spoke about the ongoing debate about the pay disparity in the cinema industry. He batted for equal pay but warned that for that to happen, the patriarchal mindset of the society needs to change. Take a look.
I have to say that in the film world, most producers would end up paying a person who they think will fill the seats for them. It just makes business sense for them to hire someone who they feel will fill seats. Friday, mein log aayenge dekhne. And for that, they're happy to pay anyone. It could be a monkey also. Let me show you that. It can be any person who fills the seats. So from a very, very harshly marketing point of view or from an economic point of view, in the film industry, actually it becomes leveled just based on, for example, at one time, Salim Javed, who are writers, were the highest paid. They were paid more than stars. Why were they paid more than stars? They're writers. Today we don't pay the writers even half of what we pay the stars. Is because they pulled people in. They actually got people on the seats. A lot of music directors did that. They were not stars. So I think that I would really like to see men and women getting paid equally, and I would also like to see women stars, whether they are actors, actresses, or technicians, or other creative people, getting paid as much as men. And that will happen, I think, that will happen more when we have our own mindset changed. We are such a patriarchal society that our heroes are invariably men. जो हमारे heroes हैं वो मर्द होते हैं. तो हमारे जो popular stars हैं वो मतलब as it turns out वो मर्द होते हैं. हमारे पास छोटा भीम है टीवी पे. कोई छोटी लड़की नहीं है जो हमारी हीरो बन जाती है. So right from childhood, I'm trained, even as a girl, I'm trained to be appreciative of a man.
Very deep set.
It's very deep set. So if this has to change, it's not going to change by some law. It's not going to change because a bunch of people decide that it's not fair. It's going to change when India as a country changes and we stop being so patriarchal. And that's going to be a gradual change, because then my hero will be a woman. My hero can be a gay person, can be anyone. That does not matter to me. And then when that person becomes extremely popular, extremely loved, that person will get paid for it. There's no question about it.
Love sports and who's watched the Olympics closely, I'm assuming. Where is the lapse, you imagine?
I'll tell you what I feel. I don't blame the athletes. I don't blame the athletes at all. I think that they're doing their very best and they are really giving it all. I think if we want to see Olympic medals and if we want world-class athletes as a society, then we have to change the way each one of us thinks towards sports. I'll give you an example. When I'm in school, any school you go to, math, history, geography, sciences are all part of the curriculum. Sports is not a compulsory part of the curriculum. It is, ठीक है, sports भी चल रहा है. PT का हम लोग exercise करते थे. My parents never asked me, how did you do in PT? They always asked me, how did you do in my subjects? As a child, you're telling me that this is not important. This is important. Number one. Number two, all that I learned in school, whether it was geography, history, biology, algebra, geometry, very little of that has actually come in use to me in my life. But what has come in use to me in my life is what I got from sports. Sports teaches you hard work, it builds your concentration, it builds team spirit. You learn how to take a defeat, you learn how to be graceful in victory. So many things that sports teaches you is actually what builds you as a human being. So whatever I am today, there's a huge contribution because I was heavily into sports. I was not so much into academics. A lot of what I am is because of that. My focus, the way I apply myself to something is the passion I bring to my work. All of that has come from sports. So I feel that as a nation, we have to think differently about sports. And we have to start it from KG. Sport is a subject. You have to treat it like a subject which is as important as a math. When that happens, you will find that the bottom of the pyramid will become huge. And that will slowly start throwing up more and more talented kids. And then the top 3% of those kids will be world-class athletes. So I think the change has to come from within each one of us. That's what I feel. So, I ask a lot of parents and they say, we want to send our child to this school and this is what we're spending on the child in school. But they never once mention the sports aspect of it. We don't give it importance. So if we don't give it importance, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely, and I think he's hit the nail on the head, Ron. It's not about infrastructure as it is about a mindset change that this is important. It needs to be part of the curriculum and you need to start...
Hard to dispute what he said.
Absolutely, but from Mr. Perfectionist to the King Khan,